Thanks so much for clarifying this question. And I'm hoping that I got a better understanding of what it is that you're asking. So it sounds like that you put in a borrow defense application, but you put your application in after finding out that the Sweet versus McMahon settlement was already closed, because you had to put your application in between June 23rd, 2022 and November 16th, 2022 in order to be a member in that settlement. But because you put your application in after the fact, then you would not technically be a member of that settlement. And even if you put in a second application, because you said you already submitted one, even if you put in a second application, you still would not be eligible to become a member in that settlement, because again, that settlement is closed. So what that means for you, and then too, what's important to note about the borrow defense program is that the Sweet settlement, the Sweet versus McMahon settlement, did not create the program. It was not created because of the settlement. This program was around way before that settlement was even brought to life, even before that complaint even took place. And it's still available, even though that settlement has been closed. Also, what's another important thing to note about the Sweet versus McMahon settlement is that those borrowers, their loans were not discharged because of their borrower's defense application. Now, mind you, their borrower's defense application was the basis of, or the misconduct that their schools that they borrowed those federal student loans for was the basis of them putting in a borrower's defense application. But ultimately, their loans were discharged due to the fact of how the Department of Education was handling or mishandling or failing to make decisions on their borrower's defense applications. That is how their loans were discharged. So that's another thing to remember, okay? So with your particular application, because you submitted your application after this settlement was closed, and that settlement there was a timeline, and this is why the video that I created was speaking to those post-class members, because there's a timeline that is connected to that settlement that the Department of Education has to provide borrowers who are in that settlement with a decision on their application. And because the Department of Education has failed to do so for a certain set in that settlement, which are those who attended those Exhibit C schools that are labeled as Exhibit C, and then in the video that you responded under, those were borrowers or members in that settlement who did not attend schools that were labeled as Exhibit C. So if the Department of Education doesn't make a decision or provide them with a decision, either a approval or a denial on their applications by the 15th of April, what that means is that they are entitled to full settlement relief, meaning a discharge of their loans, any refunds, and the information removed from their credit reports. But in your case, because you're not a member in the settlement, that means that there is no timeline that the Department of Education has to make a decision on your application. And that's actually listed in the application. And I don't know when you put your application in, but if you look at the current application that is available, there is no timeline. And then with the passing of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, it even extended. There's some other provisions that also come along with the borrow defense program. But for yourself, and I hope that I got that correct, if you put your application in after that November 16th, 2022 date, there is no timeline currently as things stand for the Department of Education to make a decision on your application. Now, mind you, things can happen down the road. There could be lawsuits and things of that nature against your school that'll bring your application out of that individual status that it's in, and potentially pull you into a class action or a group type of discharge. But as things stand right now for borrow defense, there is no timeline for a decision to be made on your application. All right. And it could take years before a decision is made. But I hope that helps. Let me know if that was what your question is, if that's what it was centered around. All right. Good luck with everything.